All right, metagaming. Today we're going to talk about metagaming. So, first we're going to talk about the prefix meta. That means that something concerns itself with itself recursively. So, if we're looking at like meta-analysis in scientific papers, that is not an experiment or a study that we're doing. It is a study of studies. It concerns itself with itself. In video games, the meta is sometimes mistakenly called the most effective tactic available. That's a misnomer. So, really, what it is it's the game of playing the game. If we take something like Neverwinter Nights, for example, and we look at the rogue class, statistically, mechanically, it's totally fine. It's in line with all the others. But it's not meta because 90% of the campaign is undead that are immune to sneak attacks. Without that additional fact, rogue's totally fine. But in the meta, it's totally not. So that is the game of playing that specific game. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about metagaming in role-playing games. Now, this is very often used in a derogatory way, like you filthy metagamer, but some degree of metagaming is almost necessary to even play the game. Some examples are actively good and virtuous, and some are bad, others are sneaky bad ones that you might not even realize that you're doing, and you can make an effort to stop. So we're going to go through a couple of examples. Bad meta, for example, would be if you, the player, know that undead skeletons are weak to bludgeoning, and your character has never ever fought a skeleton, seen a skeleton, doesn't know anything about skeletons, and you immediately switch to your bludgeoning weapon. That is metagaming. It's a small example, but generally it would be a lot more immersive and interesting if you just tried to fight the skeleton how you normally do, and your party had to come up with solutions. So importantly, this is not pretending that you don't know that skeletons are weak to bludgeoning. That is a common mistake people make. They think, I have to play an idiot. But that's not what it is. You are role-playing someone that doesn't know, and their journey of discovering that. It's the same as any other story decision you make at any point in time. You are role-playing that character. You're not just playing them mechanically. You're not cutting yourself off from knowledge. You are discovering that knowledge and going through the process of that. It can be difficult once you've played any specific game for a long time to continue to do this with new characters. And my advice for that is for DMs, storytellers, GMs, to homebrew your monsters. Make skeletons that are not weak to bludgeoning. You will really make it a better game for your more min-maxy players that can't help it. So what is an example of good metagaming? Good metagaming is keeping the party together. It's taking what your character would do and massaging it into what the party's doing anyway. That is a metagame decision. You, the player, have the knowledge that you're trying to keep the party together. And you are changing your decisions in game based on that. But you are doing it for the good of the game, of the story altogether. You're facilitating it. Okay, now there are also sneaky examples where you don't even know that you're metagaming, but you might be, and you might be able to stop. So if you've watched a ton of movies and played a ton of games, there are certain patterns that will be in your brain that you don't even know that you're recognizing things as that and using that to solve problems. Very commonly, patterns of 3, or, the DM specifically said a word and you're like, well, that's weird that he said that word. That is not a good reason for your character to figure out a puzzle. He should go investigate that. And going to investigate that is a metagame decision, but it facilitates the game, so it's fine. It's very common for people who are in storytelling, writers and movie makers and things, to really have like an inherent understanding of like plot structures and like 3-part acts and things like that. And using that to deduce who the big bad end guy is, or using that to figure out like how far from the end you are, is not ideal. So we've talked about the types, but let's really talk about like metagaming at the table. If you are doing it for the good of the story, in the sense that you are facilitating the game, great. If you are doing it for your personal character to succeed, bad. If you are doing it because you don't realize it, be more aware, and then you can stop and the game will be more fun for you. So I want to go back to what I said earlier about it's not pretending that you don't know. It is role-playing someone who doesn't know. And that is really the crux of the whole thing, is that there's no objective. We're not trying to win. The surprise moments are kind of the best in role-playing, and going through the process of figuring out what's going to work and what's not going to work is going to be more interesting for everyone at the table than just being like, oh, Brain Dragon got to use fire. Like, that's less rad roleplay wise. But I don't want to just say that this all falls on the players, because DMs metagame too, and they might even do it more. One of the most common ways for DMs to metagame is to look at a bonus, like let's say the rogue has +10 to lockpicking. They will raise the lockpicking difficulty of every single lock in the game by 10, nullifying that bonus. That is metagaming, that is bullshit, and you're an awful DM. So things like that, counterpicking specific abilities that the players have, they haven't used them in the world or anything, you're just counterpicking them because you know their character sheet. That's metagaming, it's awful, and you are ruining the game. So it's not one-sided, and everyone does it to some degree, sometimes on purpose, sometimes not. So really, the general message I'm trying to get across is that metagaming is both necessary, it's good, it's bad, sometimes it's unintentional. But if we can remove the bad metagaming and ramp up the good metagaming, we will end up with a much more fun game. So if you're worried about metagaming in your first couple of games, just ignore everything that you think you know. Assume that the DM has changed the world, that the monsters are not exactly what they are in the rulebook, that the dungeon that you see may have some surprises. Metagaming really revolves around the idea that you think you know the answers, and the more the DMs can make that not true, the easier it is for players to stop doing it.